So far, we have covered the following. Allow me to give you a brief recap of what we have covered so far. We discussed understanding our learners, and we realized that there are different kinds of learners. And since we have different kinds of learners, we want to address each of these individualities. And so we have differentiated instruction. On the second part, we explore the different ways on how technology can be used to address these differences. And so we explored how technology can be used for differentiated instruction. We explored and tried to enumerate the different features of technology that would help us have a differentiated classroom, or in short, would help us to implement differentiated instruction. On the third part of this module, we are going to start with the different ways on how we can differentiate. Of course, with the hope of using technology as a tool for differentiated instruction. And so, we would be discussing the different ways to differentiate. There are actually three different ways by which we can differentiate. One is by content, another is by process, and the other is by product. And so, we will tackle each one of them so that we would have a clearer understanding on how we can differentiate instruction. Let's discuss how we can differentiate content. And so, content refers to the materials that the students will master. So this would be the lessons, the concepts that we want them to have a clearer understanding of, or probably pieces of knowledge that we want our students to memorize probably, or recall sometime in the future when the need for it arises. Process would refer to the learning activities. As mentioned, these refer to the learning activities that connect the learner to the content. And lastly, would be the product. This is our evidence. This is our proof that the students actually learned something from what we have taught. So the product would refer to the evidence by which we would know that students have attained a certain level of mastery. So we would be looking at their outputs, probably a portfolio, a project, something that would give us an idea that, hey, my students have already learned what we really wanted them to learn. So we have three ways to differentiate: content, process, and product. We will discuss first how we can differentiate content. So again, we go back to what content is. We said that the content refers to the material that the students will master. In other words, these are the concepts and ideas that the students are to learn. As teachers, I believe we can be content experts. Actually, we have to be content experts. But our students would not be ready to assimilate, or should I say, digest all the content that we would be giving to them. Thus, the need to differentiate content so that each variation of students would have a better chance of understanding what we want them to understand. First, we explore how to differentiate content in terms of varied reading levels. Some students would be able to read something like this. Some students would be able to appreciate text, but even with older students, there are students who would prefer more illustrations. There are students who would prefer bigger fonts. There are students who would want a vocabulary that is easier for them to understand. And also, there are also some students who get bored with simple words. And so, we have to cater to these different varied levels. Thankfully, technology affords us to deal with this through level texts. I'm going to show you one particular site that sort of publishes articles online, but does a certain paraphrasing so that each set or each version would cater to a particular student with a different kind of reading level. Let me show you tweentribune.com. It's actually a site put up by the Smithsonian Institute. It's tweentribune.com. So, I think we are all familiar with the Lexile rank. Just to give you an idea, in Lexile ranking, those who have a more advanced reading development would have a higher Lexile rank. And so we could assume that, for example, a grade 1 student would have a lower Lexile rank than a grade 6 student. Obviously, but even within the same year level, within the same grade level, some students may have a lower Lexile rank as compared to the others. I think you would recall the times when you, or when we, even as teachers, when we were young, our fathers or our parents would have to force us to, hey, read the newspaper. As a grade 1 pupil at that time, I couldn't imagine reading a newspaper. But thanks to technology, we can actually ask our students to read news articles because we are now aware of what we call the Lexile rank. And there are online resources that make use of this available knowledge, like this one. So, I have here a snapshot of a same article, one single article, but they are written in a different manner. The one on top is written for those readers with a 780 Lexile rank. The one below that article is actually the same article, but it's written in a way that a student of 1,400 Lexile rank would be able to appreciate. Let's try to focus on the first paragraph. Israel is embarking on a major archaeological expedition. The country in the Middle East hopes to find more Dead Sea Scrolls. This is according to an Israeli official. A 780 Lexile rank would be able to understand this. Let's try to see the difference if this article is intended for an audience comprising of students with a 1,400 Lexile rank. If we're going to compare this first paragraph, it says, Israel is embarking on a major archaeological expedition to find yet undiscovered Dead Sea Scrolls, according to an Israeli official. So you see, we have the same article, but since the site made use of the differences in Lexile rank and tapped this idea so that even those with a lower Lexile rank would be able to understand and appreciate the article. If only this were available when we were learning as students, then probably we would have read news articles better. Now this is just one of them. Aside from newsella.com, we can also explore, okay, this one is Newsella. We can also explore the Times in Plain English. Or it's a site actually republishing articles from the Times, but sort of paraphrases it so that students with a lower Lexile rank would be able to appreciate it. Another way to differentiate content is to differentiate it in terms of complexity. One way of doing this is through leveled questions. A question can be understood by one set of students, but cannot be easily understood by another group of students. Then again, this question might be a bit boring for another kind of student. Let's take an example. If there are any social studies teachers here, I think they would be able to relate to this question. Let's say that this particular question is part of your, maybe a motivation, maybe a part of your quiz. The question goes like, describe any citizenship duty that you have fulfilled. In what ways does this make you a better citizen of the country? This might be understood by many of your students, but take note, we are not contented with many. We actually want all to understand our question. We actually want all to benefit from the things that we're doing inside the classroom. And so, this question, which can cater for the average learner, for the average student, may be a bit difficult for those who are having a difficult time, especially with social studies. I did not like social studies when I was a teacher, but now I'm a teacher. Yes, I like social studies so much. So this one is an example of how level texts can be utilized. The same question is paraphrased so that it would cater to someone who is having difficulty, or so-called students below grade level. Tell about a time when you fulfilled a citizenship duty from the questionnaire. So take note, the citizenship duty may already be part of the questionnaire. The same competency is addressed, but you're giving this level of students a certain heads up so that they would be able to appreciate and better understand the question. How does this make you a good citizen? Different levels, but actually attacking the same concept. So we have one for the average, we have one for those who are a bit struggling, and there are students who would get bored with either questions. So we will have one for those so-called above grade level students. So the same question, describe any citizenship duty that you have fulfilled and in what ways does this make you a better citizen of the country, for an above grade level student can be paraphrased like this. In your opinion, what are the 3 most important citizenship duties that you should fulfill? In what ways does this make a person a better citizen? If you will compare this to the below grade level, this one is actually demanding more from the student. We can say that this demands a certain higher order thinking. But basically, the concept we want to address is there. The competency we want the student to acquire is there. And we were able to do it because of leveled questions. I'm sure we're all familiar with graphic organizers. We were asked to create tables, charts, flowcharts, and more tables and more charts so that our notebooks would be filled with different charts. But not all graphic organizers can be understood by all types of students, and so we can use shared graphic organizers. Like this, for example, for the science teachers, this is a graphic organizer for Newton's second law of motion. Does anyone recall what the second law of motion is? Right. So Newton's second law of motion can be discussed in this manner. For a student having difficulty with what the Newton's second law of motion is, it's just a set of blanks. But there are students who would be able to answer, who would be able to fill up this graphic organizer. So for those students who need more cues, who need more hints, would probably have a better chance of understanding it with this kind of graphic organizer. This time, there are some concepts given, there are some ideas given, so that the students will have something to build up on, sort of like a scaffolding thing, so that towards the end, when they finally finish this graphic organizer, they would have a better understanding of what Newton's second law of motion is. Does anyone remember at this point? Let's see if we would all remember by the third graphic organizer. This one may be more graphical, and some students, some pupils would not like circles. They would find this a bit cluttery. But there are students who would prefer this. And not just that, there are more facts, there are more concepts that are tied to each of the important concepts in Newton's second law of motion. Thus, the same lesson, given different kinds of tiered graphic organizers, would have a better chance to be understood by different levels of students. So, does anyone realize by now what Newton's second law of motion is? You may ask the science teacher who is seated beside you. And of course, we can also address the varied levels of readiness. Now, this is not to be compared with level texts, although they're somewhat similar. When we say varied levels of readiness, some students get in the classroom, come in the classroom, and they're ready to learn, all motivated and all fired up. Some students would need a bit of perking up. And there are really some students who would need motivation, blood, sweat, tears, and all sorts of prayers and even rituals just to have them engaged in the lesson. We want to address all those students, and so we may need to differentiate content in terms of varied levels of readiness. And the best way, or probably one of the best ways to address this, is by use of support videos. These are not really new pieces of technology or new resources, but just to give you an idea, this can help. This can help you make your message come across for those students who are not really that ready as compared to that achieving student who is very, very ready and fired up. So, YouTube, I'm sure you're all familiar with YouTube. There are all sorts of videos available in YouTube that would be related to your subject matter. All you have to do is to search for it in YouTube. Of course, you have to be careful. Before you give any video as an assignment or something for them to view on, you have to scan it first. The good thing is, there is YouTube, where videos are available. Also, we have videos from the National Geographic, videos from Khan Academy. Khan Academy has different tutorials similar to this online tutorial or online webinar that you're viewing right now. We also have TED-Ed, Lessons Worth Sharing, one of my favorite sites for online seminars or online talks. We also have Learn Zillion, and we have Crash Course. These are different platforms providing us with videos that can be used in the classroom. One thing about videos is, for teachers, it conserves our energy, it conserves our voice. But more importantly, for students who are not really keen in going to the classroom, if they have a chance to watch the video, there is a chance, a big chance, that even before coming to class, they are already prepared. And so we have addressed the varied levels of readiness. So again, in summary, for differentiating content, there are 3 strategies. We differentiate content for varied reading levels, we differentiate content in terms of complexity, and we differentiate content for varied levels of readiness. In the next part, we are going to examine ways to differentiate, this time in differentiating process.